Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by learning to develop yourself, your skills, your network, and more. I'm Brian, your host. Look, I know it's 2024, but I think it's worth exploring the 2023 Developer Survey. This survey is done once a year by the people at stackoverflow.com, the main website for all developers to go to get questions answered, to ask questions, to basically learn from each other. It is like the site that all developers will go to at some point. In fact, it's probably the main site that all developers universally go to. So it's a gold mine full of information, especially if you're learning to code, if you're in the beginning of your career, because the problem with a lot of advice you read online, including mine, is that it comes from somebody's head. They may have worked at one or two places or three or four or five in a single city or a single region in the world or the United States. And they make a lot of inferences and suggestions based on this really limited experience. So the problem with listening to somebody that says, hey, I think you should learn this particular technology because I see that it's going to get you a job based on my experience. And I'm like, that's great. That's based on your experience. But what about like the whole representative collective community, right? So luckily, Stack Overflow does this for us. They survey 90,000 developers, which is still a drop in the bucket, by the way. So let's not read too much into this, but it's definitely worth learning more about and seeing what kind of patterns, trends we can see emerging here, because they typically do represent what's going to happen in the larger industry, especially if you're learning to code, because one of the problems I see the most and one of the questions I get asked the most is, what should I be learning? How should I be learning it? Basically, give me like a recipe for what to learn to be hireable. And I would kind of say that the 2023 Developer Survey can basically tell you that. If you kind of backfill and reverse engineer all those different technologies that people that are getting paid to code already know or have learned, or things that are emerging, you can kind of see like what you're going to need to do. So without further ado, let's like dive into it. And I would say, first of all, like the basics: HTML, CSS, Git, GitHub, JavaScript. You can learn all that for free on codecademy.com, by the way. Parsity.io, the bootcamp that I own and work with, we go much further. We go into full stack land and use a ton of the technologies on this list, including a couple that I know are going to bubble up and become the next big trends in 2024 that already are. So yeah, let's check this out. So overview tells us a bit about what the Stack Overflow survey does. They ask people from all around the world, you know, what they're using, how they've learned to code, the most popular technologies, and, you know, who they are, demographics. Demographics probably won't shock you. It's like all dudes, mostly Asian and white. I honestly is not as interested in that piece of it because it doesn't tell me the things that I need to know, which are most importantly, technology, which is what we really care about. So one interesting thing here is that the majority of developers, the overwhelming majority, have a bachelor's degree. I say that not to scare you or to make you think you got to get a bachelor's degree. I say that because it's the reality. At Parsity, most of our students do not have computer science degrees. I'd say, 90-something% done. On the coasts of the United States, this is becoming increasingly less important. Facebook, Google, Netflix, they don't care. I mean, most companies just don't care on the coast, but I do know that if you're in the middle of the country or in other countries outside of the United States, this could become more of a thing. But I think you should also know that, yeah, the most traditional path is still the most popular path. So boot camps are great if you're, maybe out of college, you don't have the money or the time to go back. Great way to get into this space if you don't have it. But I'd say if you're young out there and you're thinking about doing a career here, I would probably just go for the bachelor's degree. In fact, we hired a couple people recently at my job, and they not only have a bachelor's degree, they also went to a coding boot camp. I have seen that trend exploding lately. Well, within my own, small network, I've seen more than a few people that I've seen go to a college, like a really good one, like UCLA or UC Berkeley, and then go to a coding boot camp, which I think is, one, pretty cool. Two, kind of insane, because I'm like, wow, you went to a college and then you also paid for the boot camp. So yeah, maybe go to a college if you can. Learning to code. Everybody's using online resources right now, especially since the pandemic. Like no one's doing in-person anything. Most developers work remote. Books and physical media, at 50% of developers say they use this. This is really, 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 really important. Too many people are out there trying to learn to code from like watching nothing but YouTube videos or just like always wanting to find a video. There's so many better ways to learn to code, and learning how to read and get information, parse it out of that, and then to, use it and apply it really important because your brain can process information via text much faster than a video, which is kind of funny because I'm making a video / audio right now. I get it. I like video and audio as well. I love different forms of learning, but I'd say you need to get good at reading in order to be a good developer because most of the information you want is in documents. It's not going to be through some dude on a YouTube tutorial telling you about stuff. Oddly enough, only 10% of respondents actually went to a coding bootcamp, which I find pretty shocking. I know coding bootcamps are rising in popularity despite what's out there in social media. The facts are that more and more people are going to coding bootcamps and more companies are hiring from coding bootcamps, including Amazon. I believe Netflix is a major one. But here's the big kicker. Most of the companies that are hiring from boot camps, you've never heard of because, and maybe you don't know this, but big tech kind of went through a hiring freeze. A lot of layoffs in big tech. If you haven't watched the news lately, and people might think, oh, what a terrible time to be a developer. I went down the Reddit rabbit hole and I suggested somebody check out a coding bootcamp, not Parsity, by the way. I said, check out whatever one you want. I have one. People downvoted it. They said, this is the worst time to get into a coding bootcamp. Have you seen the market? And I'm thinking, what do all these people know about this quote unquote market? Getting a job sucks, for developers, for people in finance, for marketers, for literally any white collar job right now is going through a weird time. This is how the economy works. It goes through boom and bust cycles and boom and bust cycles. I've worked with some developers that are much older. They went through the 90s where they had the .com explosion and the incredible bust and they were out of work. And they also lived through the roaring 2000s and the explosion of all the startups. Now we're going through another explosion, which is on the horizon of AI. So what does that mean for us? That all our jobs are going to be taken? No, of course not. I mean, no, it's not going to happen. We're going to have more and more and more jobs open up. So the jobs we're seeing now aren't within the traditional big tech companies. They're smaller mom and pop shops, and mom and pop meaning, probably like 100 to 500 employees. I don't mean like the dude on Main Street. I mean smaller businesses, also in education, e-commerce, healthcare, industries that are picking up pace that generally haven't leveraged technology as much are going to be leveraging it a lot more in the future. Anyway, go to a coding bootcamp, go to a school, go to online resources, read a book, do all that stuff. Do whatever you need to do to learn to code, if that's what you want to do. Online resources that they say people use, technical documentation, Stack Overflow, surprisingly used by 82% of developers. Excellent way to gather information and to see how people explain really technical concepts. Also blogs, incredibly popular, 77% nearly. I really I write blogs, one. I read a ton of blogs. I think they're interesting to hear other people's opinions. Be careful though, when you're reading blogs too, because at the same time, I've written stuff that I now look back on and be like, you know what? Maybe that wasn't quite right. And I've removed some articles and updated my opinions on some things. Problem with writing online is, and reading things online and taking it as the gospel, is that you're just reading some other person's opinion about what they've done. I think one of the best ways to make sure you're reading and taking good advice is to look at a person's work history, look at some of their other projects they may have done, and see, is this really a person I can trust and take advice from? Would I want to take advice from a junior developer about how to architect a complex web application? Maybe not. Maybe they're really good and I should, but maybe that might give you a clue to maybe not do that. Of course, Udemy, one of the most popular platforms for learning. I don't have a problem with that. People think I hate tutorials. I don't hate tutorials at all. I think they're a great thing. I think you should be using tutorials. I've made a bunch of tutorials. In fact, you can go to the website parsity.io, check out our free resources. You can grab some of the stuff I've made. I've also done a unit testing course, which I give it to all Parsity grads. I have like another more hands-on learning course that has 0 videos really, that is all based on unit tests passing. So you write some code, you make a unit test pass, and that teaches you how to get some quick feedback and get you in the mode of like what it would be like to work as a developer in a professional environment. Coursera, another big one. Codecademy, if you are learning to code, by far and away my favorite platform because you're writing code, you're getting feedback within the editor, and you're learning in a really, you get that short feedback loop and learning at a good enough pace. And I think for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, do that. In fact, at Parsity, we tell you, go to Codecademy because we want to get you up to speed with these very, very basics so we can take you into the more advanced concepts. We want to take you to be a coder to a software engineer, a person that's solving complex problems, learning how to think through problems and writing tests, basically understanding the whole software development life cycle. HTML and CSS are important, but these are things you can easily learn on your own. You don't need us to pay us and our mentors how to do that. You can do that on your own. Who are the people that are contributing to this survey? And who are the people generally in tech at large? They are mostly people, it looks like, with 5 to 9 years of experience and up to 14 years of experience, up to actually, wow. So the majority of people on Stack Overflow contributing to this survey are in this range of like, they got between 5 and like 20 years experience, with 5 to 9 years being the absolute largest chunk of people in there. But the second largest is people with 10 to 14 years experience. Very interesting. So a lot of, I wouldn't say older, because what does that even mean? I mean, it's 35 old. I hope not. I'm 40. But anyway, people that are on here typically have lots of experience as developers. That first couple years you're a developer, you're really just learning. You're really, really learning. That's when your true education starts, I would say. At a boot camp or a college, you're getting used to the ideas and the concepts, but you're not really you're not there yet. Your first real education takes place on the job. So these are the people that are telling you what you should be learning, or rather, these are the people that have contributed to this survey in general. But now I want to get into what are the things you should be studying? What are the things you should be learning to actually be hireable as a software engineer? By the way, software engineer, web developer, web application programmer, these are basically interchangeable terms I used. What they all boil down to, are you writing code for the front end and the back end? Front end meaning the UI, the user interface, the stuff that appears in the browser when you go to a website. The back end meaning the database and the web services that are probably living out there on the cloud that are interacting with these databases and then serving that data to the front end. For example, if you went to Airbnb, you would go to the front of the website would be like you'd type in like where your location is. Well, that information would be then transmitted to the back end over a network request to a web server sitting somewhere in the cloud that would say, oh, I have the data you want. You want all of the, houses that are located in Los Angeles, California. I'm going to take that query and return you a bunch of data that you're going to then serve on the screen. So anyway, I just wanted to get to the fact that I use these terms interchangeably. We're going to be talking about full stack stuff. Why do you want to be a full stack developer? Well, the overwhelming majority of developers are full stack. I think this trend is only going to increase. I think the need for full stack developers is only going to increase. And why is that? Because as large tech companies continue to decrease their footprint and continue to not hire very much to the foreseeable future, and more startups hire, more traditional businesses begin hiring. I work, for example, within a marketing organization. Do you think that they care whether I'm a front end or a back end person or have much of an idea of that concept in general? No. If I had a small startup, would I want to hire a front end person and a back end person for a really small startup? Absolutely not, because it's a lot more cost effective to hire somebody that knows both. Now, being full stack doesn't mean you're like equally good at the back end and the front end. That would be really impressive, actually, because very few people can do that really well. Some people can, but most people tend to have their concentration, their focus in one area. So I'd say for a lot of you out there that are maybe learning to code, going to a coding boot camp, focusing on more of the front end is going to be where you feel more comfortable. And then also learning enough of the back end to be comfortable is good. That's good enough. Understanding databases, how to set up a database like Mongo or SQL in the cloud, basically how to create schemas, types that would enforce validation of those types. Like, you want to make sure that a user type doesn't allow, a string for their birth date or something like that. You want to understand these basic fundamentals of how to develop a backend and then how to develop a web service to interact with that backend. That's going to set you apart from a lot of other bootcamp grads that are essentially just these like really tight front end focused people. They're going to have a harder time, I believe, on the job market. And as we see the professional developers out there that are only front end, only like 6%, which is pretty crazy. I'd not to speak down on front end. I think it gets too bad of a rap in general. I would say that a lot of Parsity grads, many of them go into either full stack roles, and a few have gone into fully back end roles. I think that's pretty cool, actually. In fact, when I started off, I thought I was going to be a strictly front end developer. I got my first job doing C#, SQL, .NET. And I thought, you know what? I want to go back end now. And then I went full stack for a while, and now I'm back to the front end almost exclusively for the last few years. So you can go all over the place. I still do enjoy doing back end stuff, but front end is where I've kind of landed in my career at this point. Most of the people that did this survey, by the way, are from the United States of America, Germany and India being the next two in line, and UK being close in with Germany and India as far as respondents, the number of respondents that participated in this survey. Most are around 25 to 34. Again, there's an idea that the average developer out there is some like 18-year-old, 20-year-old kid basically with a hoodie on. It's just not the case. The majority are between 25 and 34. The next largest majority is between 35 and 44. Interesting, right? So get this idea out of your head, which I really don't like, that all developers got to be some young dude. First of all, they can be, I've met an older women that code. I've met a lot of older dudes that code. And yeah, they need people with experience. It's not exactly a young person's game exclusively. I mean, those are the people that are getting into the industry at the most entry level points. But remember, you're going to be in this career till you're what, 65? So even if you started at 45, that would leave you 2 full decades. I would expect in 2 full decades that you'd be in some type of leadership position at that point, if you wanted to be. I'd expect fully that you'd at least be senior or tech lead or something at that point. But all I'm saying is, this idea that, am I too old to start? And the person's like 25. I'm like, well, I hope not. that would be depressing. Okay. The part you care about the most. What are the technologies that are making the landscape of the web development world? JavaScript should be no surprise, coming in at number 1 by a large margin. You got to know JavaScript. It's just the thing you have to know. If you don't know JavaScript, you're going to have a difficult time getting hired. Straight up. And I talk to people on the phone all the time. And I'm like, oh, what are you learning? Python. And I think part of me gets a little confused. I'm like, well, that's cool, but why are you starting with Python? Because it's the language of data science, right? And that's a really cool, hot new technology. It's also difficult to just get into data science without any kind of background in statistics or data analysis. I've met data scientists. They are a very strange breed. They are part statistician, part coder, part business analyst. These people know a lot. I have actually rarely met one that came from a boot camp, generally because they require this mathematical background. I do know that there's a lot of people working as data engineers or kind of these related fields that aren't particularly data science. But anyway, what I'm saying is this whole idea of just learn Python, I don't get it. I don't get that at all. Doesn't make a ton of sense to me if you're trying to break into the industry. I think Python's a wonderful thing to learn. I think it's great. In fact, I've met some developers that think you should learn that as your first language. I think to be hireable, though, you should absolutely learn JavaScript, like zero question about it. Why would you not? You have to. Yeah, you have to. Anyway, HTML and CSS. Yeah, I mean, come on. It's number 2 on the list. Guess what's number 3? Python. SQL next. TypeScript next. Then you got Bash, Java, C#, and all these languages that fall much, much lower in there. TypeScript being a really interesting one. We've just introduced TypeScript into the curriculum for Parsity and definitely got some ways to improve there and add more into the curriculum. But honestly, because TypeScript is a superset, basically it's like the cousin of JavaScript, essentially, you could think of it like that. You don't need to relearn all of JavaScript to know TypeScript. We just want to get you just dangerous enough with TypeScript that you can go on, do some cool stuff with it, understand it more than the majority of bootcamp grads out there, and use it in a regular, kind of professional production type environment. We have you take your code that you've written in a former project and then move it to TypeScript. A lot of students are now choosing to do their final capstone projects in TypeScript. Wonderful idea. But again, JavaScript, not learning it. Why? If we go to professional developers, it jumps up even more the number of JavaScript developers out there. It's like a few percent higher than the people that are just learning to code. Yeah, so for sure. Databases, SQL, number 1, MySQL, number 2, SQLite, number 3, MongoDB, number 2. So I kind of categorize all these SQL ones. I'm just going to just dump them in one box, right? I don't know enough SQL differences to be knowledgeable or speak intelligently about the differences between SQLite, MySQL, and Postgres SQL. But I've used SQL throughout the majority of my career as a beginner. I started using it again recently, but I've used MongoDB actually for the rest of the jobs I've been on, it's been pretty equally split between MongoDB and SQL. It's not uncommon to see a company that uses both MongoDB. MongoDB used to be kind of like the cool new thing. It's not cool or new anymore. It's just really ubiquitous and used everywhere. So that's one of the reasons why we choose to teach it. People talk a lot of trash about the MERN stack, Mongo, Express, React, Node. They say, the boot camps, they just crank out these cookie cutter developers that know this same stuff. But I'm like, think about this. Would you want to learn like a really unique stack that only, a handful of companies are hiring for? Would you really want to know that? Probably not. I'd say later in your career, that actually might be a good choice. The beginning of your career, though, why would you want to learn something that fewer companies are hiring for? Wouldn't you want to learn what the majority of professional developers are doing, especially those older ones that are likely going to either retire or move on to leadership roles that don't require coding? Doesn't that make a lot of sense to you? I don't get some of the hate that I see about like boot camps or generally learning this stack or trash talk on JavaScript developers. It comes from this weird, like arrogant place that people think, I know better, or because everybody knows this thing or claims to know this thing, it's got to be inherently bad. It's like, you drive a Toyota and everybody drives a Toyota. I drive a, Lamborghini, and that's inherently better because it's more unique. In this case, it's not the best idea to be unique. It's better to fall in line with what the rest of the people are doing. I would say, maybe you disagree. I don't know. But all I do know is that MERN stack tends to get people hired. That's why we use it. Cloud platforms. What are people using to deploy their code into the web? This comes as no surprise to me. Maybe it will to you. Amazon Web Services, AWS. A lot of people ask me what they should use to deploy their stuff, and they bring up Heroku a lot or Netlify. And I like both these things. I've used them both. In fact, Parsity.io's website is deployed on Netlify currently. But recently, we switched our full stack project to use Vercel, which is kind of far down low on the list, actually. This is one of the bets I'm taking with Parsity and in general, that Vercel is going to become a major, major factor out there in the space, the cloud space, and it's going to give a run for a lot of people's money. At the time this survey came out, it was like number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 down there. It's actually below Heroku as far as who's using it. And I look at professional developers, and it's about in the same place as well. It's a little bit above Netlify. But I think that in 1 to 2 years' time, we're going to see it skyrocket up there, especially as Next.js skyrockets in popularity. Because right now, unfortunately, if you use Next.js, you're kind of locked into using Vercel as your cloud service provider. Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud being the 1, 2, and 3 top CSPs, cloud service providers. AWS, really important. In fact, I have a side project that I give people to do that they have access to it. If they want to do it, it's a bonus, really. And it involves putting a TypeScript Lambda function on AWS. And if that sounds like a tech word salad, kind of is, some buzzwords. But at the end of the day, it's making sure it's making an application that you can deploy to AWS that listens for requests and sends them back. Problem with AWS is it's not free. It has a free tier, but that free tier is free in quotes because it can get fairly expensive pretty quickly if you're not careful, which is one of the reasons we generally encourage students to use Vercel. We use render.com also. These teach you the basics of how to deploy a web app. Amazon Web Services has a lot of cool tooling. I think it's really important. We've even had some students get AWS certified, like the basic certification. Do I think that's helpful or useful? Maybe a little bit. Could be something you might want to check out. But absolutely, you should be at least exploring AWS and understanding some of the basic concepts like EC2, Lambdas, AWS Amplify for deploying apps, Code Pipeline. These are some of the basic offerings. S3, IAM, their authentication services. And there's a ton of stuff you could explore. I think the ones I've just given you will give you a very, very good start. And if you want that project, by the way, hit me up. I'm happy to share it with you. All right, web frameworks and technologies. Node.js, React, jQuery, Express, top 4. Yeah, React by far is the thing you should be learning. Vue is way down there compared to all the frameworks. Next.js is below Angular at this point. I guarantee you, I'll bet you a box of donuts that next year, Next.js will be in the top four frameworks for people to use. Express being incredibly popular. If you're using Node, you are using Express. That's just kind of the deal. For better or for worse, I know there's some competitors out there. If you're using Node for writing backend JavaScript code, you're going to use Express. Learn Express, learn Node with Express. Don't learn Node on its own. Learn Node with Express. Why? Why would you want to just learn Node.js? That's great if you want to get deep into the internals of Node.js, but if you're writing web applications and web services, use Node with Express by far. React, yeah, this is a no-brainer. People think, should I learn Vue? Should I learn Angular? I would say depending on the market you're in. For example, if you're near like Virginia government agencies, they tend to use more of a .NET stack, which includes Angular. So that's actually one of the places in the United States where I'd say, yeah, you know what? You probably do want to learn Angular over React, or maybe learn them both. I'd say React, though, being just, it's kind of become the default language of the front end, like the default framework for front end stuff. You got to learn it. And Node.js, of course, yeah, you have to also learn that too. Everybody's using it. Next.js is going to pop up the ranks very soon, I guarantee you, because now React has essentially said, hey, we are recommending officially using Next.js, and we are working with them. So Next.js and React are going to be lockstep. They're going to be working together in the future, and you want to be on that train. Other frameworks and libraries, won't really get into those. .NET, yeah, it's a thing. I've used it before. I don't know it very well. NumPy and Pandas being data science kind of frameworks or libraries that you can use with Python. I've used them both. If you want to check out some cool data science stuff with Python, try Kaggle.com, Kaggle.com. Really cool place to practice. Again, I think data science is a really interesting area, and I've met a few people that have made the jump from software engineer into data science, but it is difficult. It requires some mathematical knowledge and some base concepts that you need to know and some statistics. And if you want to go down that route, you should. But if you don't, then, I don't know. No. Docker and NPM are the things we use for downloading packages. I won't get into those too much. Docker and NPM, these are ways to manage dependencies. You want to install a bunch of stuff on your computer for an app you're working on. People use Docker and NPM. If you are new, use NPM. It's going to make your life really easy. I think Docker becomes a little bit difficult to learn and use, but if you can, you will stand out for sure, because fewer self-taught developers understand Docker. The last thing we're going to look at should come as zero surprise to you. What are people using to write their code? Is it a text editor? Is it Vim? No, of course not. It's Visual Studio Code. 3/4 of all developers use it. Crazy. It blows my mind too, because then you hear people saying, oh, you should learn some other, unique, weird thing out there. I'm like, no. Being unique is fun. If you love writing code, which I personally do, I love writing code. I love learning about new technologies. And I've spent some time learning how to use Vim, for example. But to tell people they should start on these things or only learn them or, somehow buck the trends, I don't think that's a great idea. I don't think it's a great strategy for being hireable. Because to be hireable, you want to generally speak the same language and use the same stuff as the peers that you're working with. Why would you want to go off on your own and use something that nobody's working with, or something that very few people are working with? And maybe you think, well, maybe that would increase my chances to get hired because I'm learning something that most people don't. But then I'd ask yourself this. If you're learning something that most people don't and maybe decreasing in popularity, what do you think for your long-term career trajectory that will mean? Do you think that will help or hurt in your long-term career trajectory? I would say probably hurt, right? So Visual Studio Code, learn it. In fact, I have a video on YouTube about how to do shortcuts and generally use VS Code better because most people kind of suck at it. Anyway, hope that was helpful. We went through some of the top technologies, a little bit about the Stack Overflow survey, and generally the stuff you should be learning to be hireable as a web developer. Not to be the best web developer out there, which you should be also trying to be, but to be hireable. What are people using? What are they doing? How to become hireable? You want to be hireable as a software developer in 2024 and beyond. Join me at Parsity.io. I'll see you around. That'll do it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. To learn more about becoming a software engineer with us, then check out Parsity.io. If you're not quite ready for that, then jump into our Dev30.xyz program, which is 30 days of working on your mindset, habits, and JavaScript skills. Totally worth it. See you next week.